Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another fabulous episode of A Chat with the Camel. And we are seriously privileged today. I'm talking about you're getting two vintage wines, folks, because the two old boys are in town, both grandpas. So we're going to try and keep it on the straight and narrow because being grandpas, if we talk about our grandkids, we won't shut up. We'll keep going forever. And today I want to make sure I'm spot on because we have the pleasure of Bill Sholar, who I've known. I've worked at it probably close to 10 plus years, and he's been involved in the Duda community he's an original, right? But it was funny, I was studying Bill, and I thought, well, how do I introduce him? And when I got onto his website at Short Story Marketing, I got to be honest, his bio is well worth reading. So let me give you this, right? Bill Sholar, resident geek. He makes it work great. So that's the opening, so that's good. But it says, Billy's old. So he's done a lot, including working in military intelligence. We've got to find out what he did there. Save your jokes, he's heard them. Then he started working the internet long before it was called the internet. Back then, they usually called it some blah, 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 blah. That was all swear words, Bill, depending on how things were working. Now, here's an interesting one. He later ran college computer centers, was a marketing and sales manager for Steve Jobs' Next computer company, managed an IT team in a major oil company in the business in the Middle East, and he owned a business intermediary firm. He started his website business and ran it for the first few years from a boat, right, that he'd refurbished and lived aboard while cruising up and down the East Coast. What a life. One of his original websites, FireCalc, which is registered, a retirement calculator, has been repeatedly cited in the Wall Street Journal, Newsweek, and the Dallas Morning News, among many others. Bill and his wife reside at Front Royal, Virginia, right, where they get to watch their grandkids grow up. Like, what a fabulous, I couldn't have written it better myself, Bill. So welcome to the Camel Chat, mate.
Thank you.
What an attractive.
To see you again, or meet you in person finally.
At person, that's what I'm thinking. It's just bloody amazing. And actually, Bill and I just said, the one thing about the Duda community that I love, you meet all these people, you talk to them every single day, and you have no idea what they look like. You never speak to them on the phone. It's all on Facebook thing, but it's always sending love, sending hugs. So, I'm just so close to so many of them, and I've never met them. And Bill, you're one of them. So I want to start off with my favourite question, which is the first one. And what I want to do is get a bit more of an insight into you, apart from the fact, mate, I don't think you're old. How old are you?
73.
73?
Yeah.
You've had some work, obviously, because you don't look at day. You don't look.
I was born at an early age.
My God, I'm 64, but I've had a hard life. I tell you, when I look at you, I sit back and think I've drunk too much scotch. Crazy. So, if you go back in the day when you were young and sprightly, right? Where were you born? What school did you go to? What did mum and dad do? Right? Tell us a bit about the early days of Bill.
Okay, so I was born in Connecticut, in the USA, obviously, and my parents moved around a fair amount as I was an infant and wound up in North Carolina, where I spent most of my early years. And after high school, started college at the University of North Carolina. This was back during the Vietnam days, and things being what they were in those days, I wound up in the military. Did that for a while. Got out, and as you read, I wound up after college working at some college computer centers, where I ran the center and got my geek interests satisfied to some extent. Got hired by Next Computer, which was the Steve Jobs company you heard about. When that started winding down before it got folded back into Apple, got hired to go over to Saudi Arabia, where they had actually purchased a bunch of the computers that we had that we were making.
Yeah.
And that was the goal there was to help them migrate from the mainframe world to networked small computers.
Uh-huh.
So that project went on for a few years. As we got to an end point on that, my wife and I decided to start looking at where we're going to go when we come back to the U.S.
Uh-huh.
Couldn't make up our minds immediately. So my wife said, why don't we think about getting a boat? We had some land on the coast, and we can live on the land, live on the boat while we're building a house on the land. Oh, that's a great idea. Well, our plans never did settle down there. So we bought the boat, spent several years going up and down the East Coast. What you see behind me in my background is not a Zoom background. It's a photo of an area in Florida where we used to hang out in the wintertime. So that was my view off the back deck while I was doing websites if I felt like it. So then grandkids started showing up, so I had to settle down.
Well, you had to settle down, and you're still very young. You've got many years left in you, so that's a good. I got to ask you.
Yes.
Did you actually go to Vietnam?
Did not. It turned out that the work I was doing was not needed in Vietnam. Yeah. So I wound up in Korea a couple of times, in Germany, and the places where we were close to the bad guys, so to speak, as in those days, and that's where I wound up.
Okay, Army or Marines?
Army.
Okay,
yes.
All right. So AJ5 will talk to you, right? Because he's Army. You're not allowed to say Marines, right? He gets upset with me if I talk about the Marines. What it is about these guys? They all hate each other but love each other. Now, I'm sort of guessing because you mentioned military intelligence. Fact, you're in college, military intelligence, Army. Were you in the CIA?
No, I was in an organization called the Army Security Agency, which no longer exists. We did most of our work on behalf of the National Security Agency,
NSA.
If you know who that is in the U.S., it's the organization that tries to spy on the other guys electronically, mostly.
Yes. And if you watch the movie Edward Snowden,
did not.
I tell you what, I recommend watching that. Right, when it talks about NSA, CIA, right, everyone else, that's just an unbelievable. I don't agree with what the guy did. I thought that's bad, right? But it's just an incredible movie about military intelligence and what they can do now, what they can see. Is just mind-blowing, especially on a local front where they're not really supposed to, but they do, and all this sort of stuff. Really, really interesting movie. Good movie. I recommend that one. But we'll get off military. We'll get off military intelligence. I got a lot of mates that were in that, and they got some tremendous stories. But it probably doesn't suit our audience today, right?
Probably not.
So how long ago was it that you actually started building websites on the boat?
Well, I actually had three starts, sort of. So first start, you mentioned buying our business intermediary firm. It's a business brokerage, is a different name for it. Basically, we worked like real estate people, but we bought and sold businesses. And I did that for a while and built a website for my own business, and that was 97. That's been a while back as far as the internet timeline goes. When I sold that business and went to Saudi, actually went back to Saudi. That was during a break from over there. I said, I want to get more involved in more functional websites. So I built that one you mentioned a while ago, the retirement planning calculator.
Yeah,
that was shown to the world at the beginning of 2001. But I was still there. I left there summer of 2001, moved on the boat. And at this point, I started talking to some website designers who were doing art, but they weren't doing the technology. And we talked about, hey, I can do the back end for you. I can get the website working while you make it look suitable for your clients. So I never dealt with any clients. It was always dealing with these designers. Now, if you think about what was going on in early 2001, 2002, there was not readily available Wi-Fi and things like this.
Nothing.
I used a remember the old cards about the size of a business card you plug into the side of a laptop?
Oh, God. Yes. they went in like a LAN card thingy, right? Yeah. But they looked like a credit card.
Yep.
And it cost a bloody fortune.
Yep.
Right. I remember that.
Well, if I was within range of cell service, I could get about a 300 baud modem functionality by plugging into my cell phone that way and exchange the emails and files with these website designers.
Yeah.
I wasn't in range of cell service, which was most of the time.
Yeah.
I could do the same thing through radio. It was slower, but ham radio. So I did that. So that was basically through about 2004 or thereabouts. At that point, that's when I started spending more time on land and eventually moved back to land.
Was there an actual platform, or was just all hard-coded stuff?
Oh, it was all hard-coded stuff in those days. So it stayed hard-coded until about 2005 or thereabouts. At that point, I discovered a site builder that we could allow our clients to start doing their own updates and so forth. Started working in that platform. Well, it withered and died for who knows. I think they were hoping to get bought out, and they did get bought out by a company called cPanel, but they let it drop.
Wow. Did you ever use WordPress?
Very little bit, not very much. There was a product from Adobe, well, actually before Adobe, called Business Catalyst that you may have heard people talk about.
Yep.
We used that in 2000, and that was around 2005, 2006 or so. And they got bought out by Adobe. That worked well for quite a while. And then when they decided to get out of business, that's when I switched to Duda. But my focus from the early days when I was doing the websites, and that early product was called SiteZen, but it was to let the website business owner go in and make minor changes.
Yeah. We
tried using WordPress for a while in those days, and we found universally that if the business owner didn't get their thrills by going in and doing computer stuff, they hated it. They did not like trying to figure out how to do things.
No.
So I always gravitated towards things that gave us and them more flexibility. So that's what led me to SiteZen, to Business Catalyst, and then to Duda.
So back in the day, if you built a 5-page website and you were hard coding it, how long would it take you?
So my memory's fading this after this many years. I would say probably a few weeks, but the majority of that time was waiting on. I mean, remember, I'm pulling up the anchor and going down the waterway, and then have to drop the anchor, get back online, and connect, see what the answers were, or the new questions, or whatever. So the time then, and thinking about the time even today, is often waiting for communications.
More. And nothing's changed.
Yeah, nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed. We still wait for the buggers, right? And and you say to them, they say, how long does it take to make a 5-page website? Well, if we do a template thing, we could do it in 48 hours, right? Or if we do a custom website, as long as we've got everything, we could do it in 5 to 10 days. And 5 weeks later, you're still waiting on this, waiting on that. And it's funny, I always laugh when I see that in the community. A newbie or someone will go, has anyone got a great system on hurrying clients up with their content? Well, guess what, Bill? 2007, you were doing them hard code, and we're looking at 2023, and you're still waiting. Nothing's changed, even though we've gone from hard code to Adobe Business Catalyst to beautiful drag and drop Duda. What happened? human beings are still the same.
My partner and I were discussing that yesterday, in fact, that, hey, we're still waiting. It's been a month since we sent some images and designs over to a client to review and give us feedback, and still waiting.
So what's the major, apart from the fact, you had to sit there and code, right? What's the major difference you found from back in 2007 to when you first got to Duda? Because it was good. I mean, that's what turned us, right? The reason we loved it was we were selling a bucket load of mobile websites when we first started, going back 12 years ago. And what I loved about Duda was same URL, and you had a great, because it was called Duda Mobile, you had a great mobile, a great tablet, and a great desktop. But it wasn't exactly brilliant in a lot of ways. It had things that was missing. But in your case, what do you see as the major difference between 2023 and 2007?
Okay, so a couple of things. One is that in 2007, even though there were some very good tools to use, my business partner, who, by the way, was a competitor, who's a designer when I moved back to Sholar, we teamed up, she would provide me Photoshop files. And I would have to then cut those apart and then fit them into the tool that let me do things, build a website. Something that's vastly different now is that she can go into Duda and find pieces we've used before. We save as sections, or sometimes there are canned sections that Duda provides and so forth. And she can put the components together, and I can go in and modify those to do exactly what we want to happen. So it cuts my time down, because I don't have to spend a lot of time turning art into code. Yeah. So that's changed a whole lot. The ability to save all those sections is big. I mean, the certainly better for the users, as we talked about before. Users are much easier to use, even though some of the earlier ones were not bad, but these are better.
We used a thing was called Go Mobi, and it would take you. It was so fast at creating a mobile site. But what happened was, it's sort of like the drag and drop business that, somebody that's never built a website in their life can hang the shingle up and say they're a website agency with drag and drop. But what I've noticed is, after selling websites to their brothers, sisters, aunties, and uncles, by the time they get to the nephews, they're starting to look pretty much the same, right? Because their skill set is not there. They're not designers. They're not developers, right? And what I noticed with this Go Mobi thing was that it would do these really, really, really good mobile sites, but then they all started to look the same. And what we did, we started to customize the buttons, right? And we started to do a little bit of trick and treating here and there, and we were customizing the backgrounds. And all of a sudden, we got all these very sexy, unbelievable mobile sites. But then what happened? Duda, like most people, then went down the, what's it called again? When the website goes down. What's it called?
Scrolling?
No, what's it called? I talk about that every day, and every time I have to remember it, responsive. They went down the responsive part, and so next thing you know, all these beautiful, sexy mobile sites with buttons ended up being like just smaller desktop websites. And it's funny, tomorrow on my live stream, I'm going to talk about that we've got focusing too much on the packaging, not on the present, right? And away you go. So what else was different back in 2007 compared to 2023?
Bandwidths were a lot different. So you had to make sites that, relied less on large images and so forth. We couldn't put big, huge images or things like that back in those days. Let's see. Something as simple as fonts. I mean, back in those days, you had to use fonts that came with Microsoft Word or came with Windows. Web safe fonts, we call them.
And there was like 4.
Well, I think there were 7 if you dealt with some that no one wanted to use, like Comic Sans or something like this.
Helvetica.
Yeah.
Helvetica, Comic Sans, Times Roman.
Yeah.
The list could go on. But I don't know. I love Times Roman. Right. But you remember the other one, Comic Sans or Joker? Joker. I remember the Joker font, right, in Microsoft. And you know what a lot of people don't remember about Microsoft? Back in the day, when you and I first got Windows, do you remember how many floppy disks it was?
Yeah, a handful, as I recall.
And WordPress, sorry, not WordPress, Microsoft Word, the whole day was gone, loading. Now we are so spoiled, we get a code and we just hook it into the computer and it does everything for us. And if you've got an iPhone, you just put them together, right? And just transfer it. We were so hardly done by back in the day, Bill. What about SEO? In 2007, was that a word? 3 letters?
I don't think it was much of a word, much of a concept, or it was beginning to be a concept, I guess. The people weren't so much used to looking onto search engines and so forth. I mean, there were a few that were starting to come out, and until Google, realistically, I guess Yahoo before that for a while. But then there was not very many places you could go to look stuff up. You depended on people to tell you about, here's something great. So working with other sites was important and getting publicity that way.
Yeah. So which year did you see the first major shift where, okay, at 2007, it appears like it was a bit of a luxury, right, to have a website, because it must have cost a bucket load of money too, right, to get it built. When was the shift? Was it like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years?
I'm going to guess it seemed to be around 2010, 2012 time frame. It seemed like that became a bigger and bigger issue. And I remember one client talking a conversation. He was a roofing contractor.
Yeah,
he repaired roofs, and this was in Texas. And in his business, and he made the comment that when the hailstorm goes through, which was a very common thing in that part of the U.S., he said, if you're not in the first 2 or 3 places that someone calls, you don't get the business.
No.
So he was desperate to be one of the top people, and then pay-per-click ads and so forth helped that out well. But that was a big deal back then. I mean, it still is, but the people search a little bit more these days, and they're more picky and so forth. But that's when it seemed to start coming out of the woodwork, as I recall.
So like 2010, 2011, and then all of a sudden, WordPress is getting pretty powerful by then. And I think WordPress brought it to the masses, but you still had to be a coder to do WordPress. You had to
be a coder, and and you still couldn't turn it over to the client and say, swap your own pictures.
You couldn't have turned Business Catalyst over to a client.
You had to restrict them pretty heavily to in what we do in Duda with the content editing only, where they can go in, they can update text, but not do much with. They couldn't anyway. That was one of the constraints.
So Duda was the big change in your business.
I would say Business Catalyst was probably the predecessor to that, because it was a SaaS product, not like WordPress loaded on people's server account. So it got us thinking about, that whole model. And then when Duda came along, it was like this kind of icing on the cake, so to speak.
Yep. Big difference, because all of a sudden you can give clients access to do things themselves.
Yep.
Right. And it was easy to share information, and it was easy to build. Like what would have taken you 3 or 4 weeks back in the day, all of a sudden that would only take you a day or 2.
Right.
Because you're less reliant and all that sort of stuff on. Obviously, you don't heavy code anything anymore.
Correct.
Right. Are you a widget lover?
I'm sorry?
Widgets? You love widgets?
I do. We have a bunch of yours. We've done a handful ourselves. And the ones we've done ourselves have been very specialized for a specific customer.
Yeah.
But that's changed a whole lot. But talking about turning things over to clients, just a simple example, I'm giving this away for free to all my Duda colleagues. Something we started doing because clients would always say, "Oh, look at some other pictures." And a lot of times we didn't want them changing things like backgrounds and so forth. We didn't give them the access to do some of those things. So what we would do is put a hidden page with nothing on it but a photo gallery. We would basically make that page editable by the client. In fact, before the site is done, we make that page available to the client. But all the other pages are locked for client editing, so we can continue to work until it's done. But they can go in and they can start adding pictures to that photo gallery, put a caption, use this for my about page, use this for, or whatever. And it gave them access to that, all that stock photography really easily, and they could upload their own or whatever. And lets clients get involved without us having to spend a week or 2 weeks going back and forth sharing pictures. So just, there's lots of tricks that we were able to implement that we couldn't do in the old days.
Yeah. And because you've been there such a long time, I can remember when I was selling cars, right? And I sold cars, I think, for 6 years. And we used to look forward to the 3rd year, because every 3 years they come back and buy another car. Don't know why. That seemed to be the number. 3 years, I think, I've had this thing 3 years. If I keep it any longer, it's not going to be worth that much as a trade-in. 3 years is a good thing. So if you stayed at the same dealership or within the same area, you were basically guaranteed that once you'd been in that business 3 years, that you were going to sell 5 or 6 cars a month to people that you sold cars to before.
Yep.
I noticed with TheCamel that one of the first few websites we did, after about 5 years, he came back to us and we changed it. We built him a brand new website. After about 3 years, a lot of them are asking for a facelift. Have you noticed that sort of is a phenomenon? Do you get that a lot now, where people you built them for in 2007 are coming back every 4 years?
We are. We sent out a newsletter to our clients about 3 weeks ago. And the topic of that newsletter was that technology changes, your business changes, trends change, and you get tired of what the old site. And so now we have about 6 or 7 projects in the pipeline, and we have more people signing up for discussions on redoing their website now.
Yeah.
We did have a bit of a slowdown for a couple of years, because when Adobe decided to end their Business Catalyst product, we had a couple of hundred clients that were on that platform. We need to get them off. So a lot of our time was spent moving those sites from Business Catalyst to Duda.
Did you lose many?
I don't think we lost any, as I recall. Wow. If we did, it was just time for them to retire or whatever.
Yeah.
But generally it was a matter of getting these things moved over as quick as we could into Duda. And so we're saying we had a little bit of a delay. So that ended 2020, I guess, was the end of that So now some of those guys are coming back to redo the sites.
Okay.
So
So when you
that was
first,
5 hours, by the way. Average of 5 hours per site was our conversion time.
compared to, I wonder how,
Weeks.
when you first build them, I wonder how long it took to build them.
Well, certainly several days.
Yeah.
When you're hand
You were
coding.
knocking them out in 5 hours.
Yeah, and we had no delays waiting for the clients either.
Yeah.
We said, we're going to take what you've got, put it in Duda, and we're done. And then we can discuss it.
We've migrated, I think, last year, close to 250,000 pages. We migrated from WordPress and other things over to Duda. And there is not one website, I can honestly say this, one website that we couldn't get close to 95% of the original. And luckily, yes, we got a full dev team. Nearly all of them had custom work on WordPress. We were able to replicate that.
Yep.
But it shocked me how quickly we turned those things around. That it was just so fast. But the Duda now in 2023 is a lot different than what it was back then.
Sure.
The other thing is, of course, e-commerce. Do you do a lot of that?
We started using comments, and we still use comments at the very beginning.
Mhm.
And then we typically turn it off once the site's been up and running for a while.
Yeah.
So it's very useful during the weeks following, or when the site's about ready to launch, and the few weeks afterwards. After that, we mostly just turn it off.
Yeah.
Now,
What about e-commerce sites?
we actually have stayed away from e-commerce
Wow.
as a normal thing, and it's partly due to, well, two things. Number one is preference. We really enjoy working with small business owners.
Yeah.
Most of these small business owners, they've got a small travel agency, they've got a small retail store, they're a doctor, a lawyer, a one-person consulting shop, and so forth.
Yep.
Most of them don't need the services of an e-commerce, and have no interest in spending the time it takes to keep it up to date. And deal with, something as simple as, these people want to buy 2 of these and 4 of those and 6 of these. Now they're in the shopping cart, but the shipping won't calculate because now the packaging is not the right size and shape and weight. So
it's too much hard work, and it's
much
like
hard
your
work.
business.
So what we said to those people is, show them what you've got,
Yeah.
let them call you, talk them into some more stuff, and sell them on the phone and be done with it. So
It's so bloody simple, isn't it?
it is.
I get that thing. That's where, and maybe as a salesman, I'm a very simple bloke, right? I prefer the chat, and I prefer that it's, one guy told me one thing. He said, the sign of a great salesman is when you walk out of there, the people say, God, that bloke had good timing. He came at right time when he knew that I was ready, and I was ready, because it was just a conversation. There was no pressure. It was just, easy going, away you go. And I love selling like that. But I love it. My customers become my mates, and I've got my follow-up system. I'm just sending people a message. How you going, Bill? Right. You'll notice I do that. Just ask how you are. Out of the blue. Just want to know how you're going. Because I learnt that off a great insurance salesman. Right. His name was Mike Fragapani, and he used to sell soft drinks off the back of a truck. And he knew everybody in the suburb. And he finally decided that he wanted to make more money, and he went and sold insurance. And so naturally he went back to everyone that he sold soft drinks to sell life insurance to. But the one thing I loved about Mike Fragapani, if he read something that he thought would be interesting to you, he would cut it out of the newspaper and drop it in your house. Mate, thought you'd find this interesting. He remembered everyone's football team. So if you won a premiership or you did something really well, he'd drop you a little note saying, go doggies or something like that. And I think with what you just said, keep it so simple and you'll sell so much more.
Right.
You know, is it the same with the websites?
I think it is. I mean, keeping things simple is something that sometimes we have to beat some clients over the head about because they want to make it too complicated.
Yeah.
One thing that's interesting is you look on statistics, and of course, when you have hundreds of sites that you support, you see all their statistics.
Yeah.
People don't spend a half an hour on a website.
No.
They spend a couple of minutes on a website. And so you got to get your point across, get them engaged, let them know you can solve their problem, and then the engagement takes over. So it's, we tell people, if you're going down the highway and you see a billboard, you don't have time to stop and read the fine print. It's either going to convince you to take the exit. What's that?
Which billboards grab you? The ones with a great message, and it's a quick message and a great image.
Correct. Exactly.
Right? Then you got me, right?
Right.
And what I don't understand with a lot of people, they think that a website's like the bloody Mona Lisa and the website address is the Louvre, and people are going to line up to sit there and have a look at Mona Lisa. It's not an art gallery, right? And it's not a work of art. It's a buying machine.
That's right.
And get to the point.
And we were discussing earlier what changed over the many years.
Yep.
Early on, before the Googles and the Yahoos and so forth, if you found a site that was relevant to what you wanted, you devoured that site. You went through every little bit of it. You studied it like a book.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you hit that home page. If it doesn't grab you instantly, you're going to the next Google result. So it's
crazy. There was one the other day. Right? I won't mention his name, but he put up his brand new website. And he, did the normal thing, asked for everyone's opinion. But I'm a marketer, mate. I don't look at the design of the thing, right? I look at, okay, will it help me book and buy? That's all I care about. And he had the most unbelievable statement about his business at the bottom of the page, right? And at the top of the page was the same waffle that everyone else will tell you. We're the greatest website builder you've ever seen in your life, and we'll build a beautiful website, and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to fall asleep, right? But he had this thing at the bottom, right, which basically said, I am so passionate and so anal that I'm going to drive you insane with how much I care about you and your business. And I sent him the message. I said, mate, put that up the top. And he thought, I've never thought like that before. Because to me, if you're knocking on someone's little shop door and you walk in there, there's no second chance on a first impression. And you want to know, do I feel comfortable with this bloke? Does he understand me? That's what a website's like. Right? But for some reason, you're right, Bill, they want to make it all technical.
Yep.
And they, the megapixel mob, where they worry about, they've got the big bloody great Apple screen, and they're worried about that little itty bitty thing right up the end of the corner. Do you reckon Harry Clegg customer cares? He just wants to buy some woggets or wibbits or a hamburger. He wants to eat. He wants to drive a new car. That's all they care about.
Right.
And they'll zero in. And if you look at the psychology behind how people read, they read in a Z.
Sure.
So you better get to those points in the Z. Landing pages are great websites because they cut out the waffle. It's crazy. So, right. Bill, how do you find your customers? They find you now, but before...
We wound up getting involved. Well, first of all, we had a lot of cross referrals. So some of my first customers, when I got back to the United States, when I got back off the boat, went to the local chamber of commerce, and this is what we're doing, so forth. We wound up doing a website for a guy who was building a dog kennel, a luxury place for the dog. This kennel had TVs in every dog, every little room for the dogs. Okay, had mattresses for, anyway, so very fancy thing. So did the site for him. Next thing we know, somebody else who's a competitor basically, but a little bit geographically distant, said, hey, you did this guy's site, do one for me. We wound up, we've probably done 10 or 15 or 20 of those, of that niche. We wound up in several different niches.
Wow.
One of the niches we wound up in was working with a certain group of consultants. And just by coincidence, we wound up, another business was going out. This is back in the Business Catalyst days.
Mm.
We took over about 20 or so clients of theirs, started going to their conferences.
Yep.
And after a while, we became the team that works in their niche. So now probably 50% of our clients, we've got probably 100 or so in that niche. And again, now they all refer people to us.
Wow.
So,
do you still do conferences?
We did conferences up until COVID.
Yeah.
And some of them either weren't happening or they're very cut back and so forth. This year, we had to make a decision. Are we going to do the conference or not? And we're still on the fence on one of them, which comes up in a couple of months.
Yeah.
We just skipped one before that. And we're just because of, we've already gotten a great penetration in the market. And at a conference, we get maybe 4 or 5 hours of exposure in the vendor area.
Yeah.
People are getting their coffee and, between sessions.
Yeah.
So do you spend $3,000 or $4,000 to $1,000 an hour for exposure to some people that you probably already do their website? So that's sort of our debate. So we're slowly switching to more of a advertising, email, direct mail, reach to their new members and so forth instead of the conferences.
Have you got a favorite niche?
I'm sorry?
Have you got a favorite niche?
That's probably a favorite only because, we have so many of them in that field. We really understand the field and that works well for us. Otherwise, not so much a favorite as much as, helping people get their message across. Yeah. Which causes us to be part-time business coaches because, as discussed before, they need to know how to get their message across. So we have to help with that.
So that's another reason you like that. And when you talk small business owner, are you talking where it's mum and dad or it's husband and wife or it's?
I would say that I'm going to guess that of our clients, probably 80% or more have fewer than 3 people working full time in the business.
And you're actually advising them on their business as well as their website needs.
That's what happens in effect. Now, they're not hiring us to advise them in business, but but we discuss the business and we discuss what they're trying to accomplish with their website and then discuss those goals. That becomes almost a business coaching, little miniature consulting session, and then try to implement that in the website. So, and typical client, they said, I want to put all my credentials on the homepage and so forth. So, no, they don't care about your credentials. They care about what problem you can solve for them. Let's put that on the homepage. We can take care of getting you bail money to get you out of jail. That's what they care about there. They don't care about how wise you were in the young days and respected you are these days. They care about can you get me out of jail? So
you just nailed it there. A lot of people don't know that.
Yep.
What did you just say? We solve what problems we solve. Well, why do you reckon they're there? Because they've got a problem, right? How many websites forget that, right? Like if I'm a travel agent, well, everyone's a travel agent, but I want one that's going to go to, specializes in MotoGP races in Europe. Okay. The big thing at the moment, right, is AI, right? It's like all over the shop. Now, because you and I are vintage and a bit older and a bit wiser, you and I have had that luxury of seeing every new technology, when you think about it, because we remember vinyl records before cassette players, before reel to reel, right? We remember fax machines. We remember the modem. We remember when there was no Wi-Fi. So, and you and I actually remember, what was it in the Millennium thing? The Millennium Bug? Do you remember that? When
Y2K.
Y2K. Do you remember that? It was going to be doing.
Oh, sure.
Right? And everyone made zillions of dollars selling people Y2K compliant things, which ended up being the greatest load of BS ever. Right? I was in Hong Kong then, I remember it. And I was waiting for the lights to go off at midnight. Nothing happened. Crazy. So now we've got the newbie, which is AI, which you and I, by the fact that we're vintage, we've seen lots of things happen. But how do you actually feel about it yourself personally?
The way I look at it, it's another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah.
So, when go way back when Dreamweaver came out, company called Macromedia that got bought out by Adobe years ago. All of a sudden, instead of hand coding, you had this thing you could like drag and drop things on the screen, and it would insert some code for you and so forth. And you still had to do all the code work and so forth. But there was all this outcry. It's going to put us out of business from the people who knew in the business. And that kept happening over and over again with every new tool. So now when the tool comes out, they're crude and they don't work quite as well as you might like, but they get better and better. And then another tool comes out and replaces that one. Yep. So the AI thing for me, I'll tell you something that's worked excellent, very, very well for me. And that is when I'm talking to a client, I say, you need to put more blog posts out. Well, what do I write about? I go into AI, one of the AI tools, ChatGPT, and I say, give me 25 blog topics for a person who is in the bail bonding business.
Bang.
And boom, and in 30 seconds, I've got, I can say, here, write about one of these once a week.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. And I'm not asking it to solve problems, really. No. That may come later on. I don't know. I hear a lot of discussion about it gets facts wrong. I don't care about that.
No.
On the strength of the tool, take advantage of it, and then keep on doing what I'm doing.
I think you're right. It's just a tool. It's like I remember when I got my driver's license, you had to learn in a stick shift, right? Yeah. And automatics were really expensive. That was like another $1,100 on top of the price of motor cars. So not a lot of people bought them. But now I can still drive a stick shift, and I love driving a stick shift, but every car I've got's an automatic, right? Because it's just a tool, and it allows me to enjoy my driving and focus. And, in the Philippines, we've got so much traffic. I would not like to drive a manual car in the traffic because you go 5 feet and you stop. You're 5 feet and you stop. It's crazy. So you're of the opinion of AI, it's just a tool. Don't get over upset about it. Don't think it's going to rule the world. Don't think. The only thing I'm struggling with is if people use it verbatim, whatever it gives you, and they cut and paste it and put it up there, it starts to get a bit the same, I've noticed. It doesn't have heart. Like I'm a prolific blog writer, and I write with personality and heart and jokes and Australianisms. Well, it's almost too difficult for that to copy me, right? But when I'm not feeling like writing a blog, geez, it does a bloody good job. So I reckon it's great. Okay, Bill, last question. This is my favourite one as well. So there's a really good video on YouTube of a Navy admiral who does the graduation speech at one of the universities, a former Navy SEAL. He was the guy that planned the Osama bin Laden raid, and he's a brilliant speaker. And they ask him to give that graduation speech and give his big bit of advice for the students. And it's famous because it says, always make your bed, all right? And then he goes on about why you should always make your bed. And Steve Jobs talk about, the crazy ones, right? Which is like people like you and me. So if Bill Sholar was standing in front of the Northern Carolina University you went to, right? And you were asked to give the graduation speech, what would be your sentence, your make your bed sentence? What would you give as your best advice to those 18 and 19-year-olds that are going to throw the hat up in the air?
Oh, good question. And I think that the piece of advice I would give them, no matter what they do, if they're doing it with other people, is to try to see the situation from the perspective of the other person, not just from your own.
Wow. Put the other guy's shoes on.
Yep. Walk a mile in his shoes. I mean, we've heard the same thing from our grandmothers years ago in different phrases. But what's it going to matter to that guy that you're talking to? Not just how wonderful you are. So,
when you think about what you just said, Bill, if you look at the average social media post now, people don't give a rat's bum or think, I wonder how this is going to impact the other guy. They don't care, right? Yet they're the first to scream and yell when someone does it to them.
Yep.
And I don't know if it was part of our upbringing that, mum and dad would, and my grandmother and grandfather especially, would always say, hey, you think about the other bloke's point of view for a minute. So many arguments would be stopped. So much trouble and trauma. And if you think about it, why you like those small business people so much? Because they've got a different attitude, right? And they're just nice people to do business with, So, Bill, I want to thank you for this hour because I learned a lot. And the thing I loved about this conversation, it was gentle. It was like two blokes sitting down in a pub, talking about the back in the day, talking about the new day, but you gave some pearlers when it comes to wisdom, especially AI. Don't fear it. Use it as a tool. Don't get too excited over it, as in overdo it, because people still like to do business with people.
Yep.
And the other thing I liked was talking about how much Duda's changed, but the last one, and that is, well, think about the other bloke. How are they going to feel? And if we keep that in our business frame of mind as well, we'll all end up being 73 and still making money, mate. So, Bill, you have a wonderful day there in Virginia.
Thank you.
And I appreciate your time, buddy.
Appreciate it.
Ta-da. Hey, everybody, it's Shane from TheCamel.co, and I'm here with Jeffrey. And I just want to put a quick word out. Do you know that this video is one of hundreds of videos that are available on the Camel channel? And what are the videos? There's videos on how to sell. There's videos on how to market. There's videos on how to make something. We do a great curry. You name it, we got videos about it. And we've also got a lot of videos about the special offers that the Camel has. So it's not just this thing that you're seeing now. It's a lot of information, a lot of services. You want to know more? Just click on the subscribe button. That way you don't have to search. It automatically comes to your inbox. You do that. Have a great day. From me, Jeffrey, talk to you soon. See ya.